you. There's actually a typo on page 71. Tomorrow morning, the session on food, water, and energy nexus. It says there that it's supposed to start at 9 a.m., but it should actually start at 11 a.m. Is that right, Kawaks? So if you're interested in that session tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., tomorrow morning, session 24, it actually starts at 11 a.m., not 9 a.m. That's the announcement from the organizers. And also, on this session, unfortunately, Mr. Sridhar Pandey from Ramway Technologies had a logistical glitch getting here, but we're very fortunate to have Nilmini Silva Sen replace him, and we're very glad that she's part of our session this afternoon. So I think when we start talking about smart cities, for me, I'm an energy specialist at the Asian Development Bank, and I think one of the thoughts that I have, and something that I had tried to work with my colleagues to do, is to address the issue of urbanization. And I think that is the foremost issue that we need to come to grips with and we need to solve if we're going to address development in our region. The rapid rate of urbanization in this region is resource intensive, but there are a lot of positive things that go with it. I think for the Asian Development Bank, this is something that we ourselves have not come to grips with fully, because the Asian Development Bank is organized by sectors. We have the energy sector, we have the transport sector, we have the water sector, and urban, in fact, is not a sector in the Asian Development Bank. And when we work in an urban setting, we all do our own things, right? So the transport guy might be working on sustainable transport issues, but he or she might be trying to get electric buses or electric vehicles, but he or she is not talking to me. And I don't know that they're trying to do, electric vehicles, and I could actually participate in that. And the same thing if the energy person is working in energy efficiency. In fact, one of the biggest places to save energy is in the antiquated pumps in the water system. So I think we really need to work together in an integrated way and in an urban setting. So when we start talking about smart cities like this, especially for the Asian Development Bank, it's especially relevant because we have a lot of lessons to learn ourselves on how we can do this. I was having lunch with a colleague today who was telling me that the Asian Development Bank is far behind a lot of our other sister institutions on the urban issues. So I hope that my colleagues here who are from the Asian Development will take a note and see if there are things that we can do better to address this issue. I'm going to get organized and ask Nilmini to speak first. Nilmini is the Assistant Director and Adjunct Professor at the Energy Policy Initiative Center at the University of San Diego, California. A very nice place to live, and you're going to tell us why it's better living there with what you're doing. She has 20 years of professional experience. She leads a team of urban and regional climate action planning, analyzing greenhouse gas emissions and energy mitigation policies at the intersection of local planning law, environmental law, and new low carbon laws and regulations. Thank you very much. Please come up.
Thank you very much for accepting me in your panel, because I was switched from a different one as someone didn't come. So I'm going to talk about how cities are trying to be leaders in the transition to a low-carbon economy, and in particular about how the city of San Diego in the state of California in the USA is trying to be a leader in this transition, and how this might be relevant to cities, similar-sized cities in Asian regions. Here we go, okay. So the city of San Diego is the 8th largest city in the United States with a population of about 1.3 million. It's located at the southern end of California, right next to the border with Mexico. And we like to present it as having a really high quality of life. In fact, it is called the finest city in America right now. There's a kind of campaign. And it likes to look like all these other cities and have these picture postcard images of itself at night and so on. But if you look at it during the day, we also see air pollution and we see traffic jams And so despite the fact that the city of San Diego is not an industrial city, we still have this issue, which means there's a lot of work to do to move away from fossil fuels. So what is driving these cities to do this? And California is a kind of a special place in the United States because they're attacking this from the state level in terms of energy regulation, through environmental regulation, and the combination of that with litigation by citizens and NGOs. And it's very powerful. Just to take a minute to tell you about that. California has a greenhouse gas reduction policy based on something called AB 32, which is a regulation that was passed, an act that was passed in 2006. And beneath that, we have all kinds of other regulations that are driving increasing renewable electricity for the utilities, so 50% required renewable electricity for all suppliers by 2030. We also have fuel economy standards for vehicles, so cars, light-duty trucks, heavy-duty trucks, that have been adopted by the federal government as well. And we have all kinds of other things. But even more important than those energy regulations is one environmental act called the California Environmental Quality Act. And we see that this is driving a lot of change at the city level. Why? Because the CEQA, as it is called, this Environmental Quality Act, requires all projects to undergo an environmental impact assessment. And since 2010, it's required to do greenhouse gas analysis and reduction of those for any project. What is a project? A project includes a plan that the city makes for its own development. So a city's general plan, as it is called, which is a development plan for the next 5, 10, or even 20 years, has to go through this CEQA analysis. Not only does it have to do that, CEQA requires public participation and stakeholder participation. Two things. So stakeholder participation and this analysis, the report that comes out, has to serve as an educational and informational item to decision makers and the public. If it doesn't do that, you can be guaranteed to be sued by citizens or NGOs. And that is exactly what has happened in the city of San Diego, because they're afraid of this litigation, because another city in our area has been litigated and has spent a lot of money trying to rebuff it. The region has been litigated and is spending a lot of money stuck in that. This pushed the city of San Diego to work harder and go deeper and adopt a climate action plan which is more ambitious. Okay, so basically, a climate action plan follows these steps, as you know. You do a greenhouse gas inventory for a baseline year. You adopt targets for certain years. For San Diego, it's 2020 and 2035. Then you develop a climate action plan with or without an implementation plan. So the city of San Diego is somewhere between that step 3 and 4, and we are now working with the city as a university research center and analysis center to help them to come up with the cost of implementing this plan. Just to look at the emissions picture, whether you look at it in terms of greenhouse gas emissions here on the left, or you look at it in terms of the type of fuel, you can see that transportation, and I'm sorry that this has got shifted, the headings of each pie bit. Transportation is the biggest reason for the emissions in our area, okay, followed by natural gas. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we do have a portion that is renewable energy that, of course, does not contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions. And that's kind of important to remember. On the right is all the energy we use. On the left are the greenhouse gas emissions. So I told you the process of adopting this was very important. It actually took us 5 years, 3 mayors, okay? And each mayor had a different approach, and we had to work with the mayor's office. It required working with the utilities, with the planning agencies, transportation, all the city departments which had never talked to each other before, but we came in and had to make them talk to each other. We had to talk to the legal counsel for the cities, and we importantly had to also deal with the environmental NGOs, which is why the city of San Diego did not get litigated in the process yet. And the city had more than 150 meetings over 5 years with the public. It was a multidisciplinary process. We, as sort of legal and policy people and energy people, had to work with the city energy staff, with their engineers, planners, economists, and attorneys. For us, it was a total learning process. And we discovered a lot about data issues, about methods, and about how important it is to attribute emissions to the city properly. This became a big issue, and it continues to be so, because the city doesn't want to take responsibility for emissions caused by people living in other cities. So I can talk forever about each of those issues. And this climate action plan was adopted in December, at the same time as the COP, the treaty, the agreement was signed. And I put this picture up because it really brought people together. In the middle picture, you can see these two gentlemen. The one on the right was an ex-mayor. He's from the Democratic Liberal Party. And on the left side is the current mayor. He's a conservative. And you never find them shaking hands on anything, but you did for a climate action plan. Okay, because both saw advantages for it. And behind the scenes on the left-hand side is this environmental NGO advocate who really worked over the years trying to convince the city council people that this is a plan that we want to adopt for that city. All right, so jumping into what are the policies that lead to most greenhouse gas reductions. Here you have a graph on the y-axis shows you the percentage of reductions obtained, and the colors represent the different types. So whether it's a national or state mandated regulation, whether it's a regional measure, or whether it's local measures that are leading to the reduction. So if you go across from left to right, you can see that in the beginning, the national and state mandates are really the most important thing for getting reductions in 2020. And you go to the right, that's 2035, you find that the importance of local measures is increasing. Whoop, okay. If we dig deeper into the local measures that we analyzed, and we analyzed about 30 different measures which were all adopted, but we can group them into these sectors. So we can look at efficiency in buildings, and you can see that that's only a very tiny percentage of the reductions we can get at the local level, because efficiency is being driven by state mandates. Then we have a program for sequestration from urban forestation, a little bit more. Transportation, a little bit more through land use planning, and a push incentivizing electrification. Solid waste, going for a zero waste disposal in 2040. But the biggest reductions come from grid conversion to renewable electricity. So, as you can see, the 100% renewable electricity goal by 2035 is important, efficiency less so. Transportation, reducing travel demand, less important. Shifting the mode, we have only 4% of the commuters using public transportation now, increasing that to 50% by 2050. Electrification and the others are, as you saw. Most important, the reason why this plan got so much publicity was that this mode shift and the push towards electrification. So I tried to compare with a little bit what's available for cities in Asia, and I found that there were two cities similar in size to San Diego. One was Cebu City, and one was the Johor Bahru area there, with populations similar to San Diego. And I said, okay, can we look at what is the level of emissions today? So you can see that Cebu City really is only emitting like 2 million metric tons of CO2e right now. San Diego about 13, but Johor Bahru about 20. Whereby you've got to look at where it's coming from. So Johor Bahru is an industrial city, and so therefore there's a lot coming from there. San Diego is trying to go down to about 6 in 2035. We don't know what the plan is for over there. Also looked at the type of policies that are being implemented or people are thinking about implementing in Cebu City and in Johor Bahru, and found that they're very similar to what we're talking about and doing in the city of San Diego at the local level. So capturing methane from waste, solid waste, and recycling. A little bit about water efficiency and conservation, which leads to energy use reductions. More about transportation efficiency. So although Cebu City has a very high percentage of use of public transportation, they're talking more about how we can be more efficient in terms of fuel use by those vehicles that are being used there. So it's a different approach from San Diego, but it is also in the transportation sector. And we might find that shifting mode might happen in the other direction here than in San Diego, going from 80% public use to more cars on the road. I don't see anything about 100% renewable electricity at the city levels here, or about efficiency very much. And just to finish off here, the question is whether there are any Asian cities that have joined the League of kind of cities that have adopted this 100% renewable electricity target like the city of San Diego has. And to my surprise, there is a website that has cities and regions that have adopted such targets, and there were 2 in the Philippines. One was a Mindanao. It was off-grid situation. They're trying to have a 100% renewable electricity goal. There was another one in a whole province and another island in Indonesia that was trying to become 100% renewable electricity. So I think in conclusion we can say, yes, we can learn a lot even from a developed country, how they're trying to adopt measures at the local level, how difficult it is, how much time it takes, how much stakeholder participation it takes, and it is possible to come together and to adopt a thing like this. And I think that we have a lot to learn from each other. And thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you very much. I think that, again, my point earlier that we really need to work in an integrated manner when we start talking about greenhouse gas emissions. This is a clean energy forum, but when we start talking, and a lot of what we do, a lot of what we talk about here, about electricity and power and renewables, but if you look at greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of it comes from transport. And in fact, the largest growth of greenhouse gas emissions in this region is coming from the transport sector too. So I think it's very important that we work in an integrated manner to address the climate change issues on energy. So thank you very much, and we'll have our second speaker, Jürgen Bender. Jürgen is the managing director of Bender IS Company Limited. He has more than 30 years of experience in consulting on a diverse range of projects across the telecommunications and utilities industries. Jürgen provides deep subject matter expertise, delivery execution expertise, and development of assets for utility ICT solutions. Jürgen is also a well-regarded industry participant and a member of OPERA, which is the Open European PLC Research Alliance. He may also sing opera. Better not. And a number of standardization bodies for smart grids and smart metering technology. He's also helping ADB in Nepal, and that's how we met Jürgen, advising on how we could improve things there with their grid connection. So Jürgen, please come and share with us your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Yeah, welcome everybody, and Dan, thank you for being invited here to have a chance to talk to you guys. The challenge for me is going to be stick in this 10 minutes because actually that's a subject you can talk about all day long, and but we'll try to move forward, and we actually have a Q&A session at the end, and I'll also afterwards, if somebody has questions, I'm happy to further discuss. The subject, why we bring up smart grids or smart energy network, intelligent energy networks in a smart city approach. Globally, the experience was the energy networks are a key factor when you want to improve the quality of life in cities and reduce greenhouse gases, like we heard before. So a large role comes to the energy networks. And basically, if you look into modern economies, they're based on 2 columns. One column is the reliable supply of energy, and the other column is telecommunication, or the access to communication technologies. Take one away and the country shuts down. So that's in very simple words while we look into this. And if you look at, there's a pointer? No. So if you look at that picture on the very left side, you see how we manage electricity networks, classical networks in the past, which is the typical scenario. We have somewhere generation, we transport the energy to a distribution network, and then finally to the consumer. And we wanted to manage them. We had people sitting in the substations, we had telephone connections. If you need to do something, well, you've got a call and you switch something. So today we are a little bit more advanced. We have introduced some electronic devices we can switch remotely by introducing more communication and telecommunication links. The future is going to look very different. So we incorporate not only a digital overlay of our analog energy distribution network with lots of communication technologies. We will have the increased usage of heaps of data we get from the network, where we need analytics to make out of this raw data some meaningful data to better manage our network. So the future is going to be looking very different, and processes will be automated. The key point here is smartening our environment. It's not a one-time event. That's an evolutionary process, and we're going to go through that evolutionary process over the next few years. I'm sure if we'll go sit in the same room in 10 years, we will not recognize the operations of our utilities from today anymore, because it will be very, very different from what we have today and the way we operate our networks. The smart grid as such, or the smart energy networks, or intelligent energy networks, are a very, very complex thing. And with the increased deployment of intermittent renewable energies, managing those networks becomes even more challenging. And even though technologies are developed in a global context, we have to look at that on the regional level. It differs how we address all those issues. Differs very, very much from country to country, from regulatory frameworks, how the market structures are. So a European fully deregulated market cannot compare with a typical fully integrated market across Southeast Asia. And so the approaches to that have to be very different. So the roadmap for the future should aim to increase the understanding among a number of stakeholders. And basically, you create opportunities for not only the utilities and the consumers, but also societal opportunities to be implemented. And it has been evaluated that one of the key factors to successfully deploy that is the very close cooperation in between three entities. And there's one that is the utility, that is the consumer, and that is the policymaker. And they have to revisit the issue over and over again. It's an iterative process they have to go through at all times. So again, a key point, a takeaway here is it is an approach in between many stakeholders, and we can only accomplish that for the benefit of future cities if we all work together on that platform. And this graph is to highlight actually the challenges. We look here, this is the growth of demand across the region. So the demand growth in the world, in Europe or the US, is not so significant over the next few years. But when you look here until 2050, how that is going to look like in the growing typical economies, China, India, or even here in Southeast Asia, the other developing part of Asia, we have a significant demand growth. We have aging infrastructures in our networks, which need to be replaced, and a lot of this demand growth we see here is going to be renewable energies. And you have a comparison here. So again, if you look into how much of that growth will be covered, or what the difference is in between 2010 and up to 2015, and a huge part of that bar you see there that grows will be renewable energy. It will be intermittent renewable energies, which are creating even more challenges in the grids. So when we are talking about these smart grid scenarios, there are a lot of layers and of technologies. And and some overspan the entire value chain. And you see these bars which go across the entire value chain. There are ICT technologies, ICT solutions. So again, we are moving from an analog, classical, 120-year-old energy supply system to a fully digitalized world, and potentially also, we may say goodbye to our traditional way how we not only produce energy but also consume energy, and decentralization will play a major role on that. So where we go from there? So motivated by economic and security and environmental factors, we have to move forward, and we need to look into the different characteristics and what's behind that, and how we can further progress in support of developing our society and change the way we live with energy. Because today, utilities operate on only two factors. One is cost, the other one is reliability of supply. In the future, and not only future, actually now it has to change, you have to add the factor sustainability to it. And now you create a triangle. And basically, when utilities start to review their business models, they have to go back to square one and redesign the way how they operate. So we need to look into, for future deployment, we need to look what is our current mix of energy supply and how we supply that, and what will be our future mix, how that may be developed. We need to look into what is maybe our future demand. How many people, and we see trends today, that communities on mini-grids are progressing, they go totally off-grid. Is this scenario continuing? Is this something we have to deal with? And that they get completely off our line and we don't need to worry about them anymore? Is this a tendency we have to deal with in the future? I believe so. And we have to look the status of the current and the planned development of the extension of our existing grid. Is this really necessary? If we look in scenarios that we have more and more implementation of micro and mini grids, maybe not. But in Europe, they built these transmission superhighways. They now in Southeast Asia, in the ASEAN region, transmission highways from Laos via Vietnam, down Malaysia to Singapore, Myanmar, across Cambodia and Vietnam. Is it really necessary, or do we go into invest more into decentralized energy production? And we have to review our regulatory and market structure. So regulatory frameworks, sometimes if you have a fully integrated market, are not giving a lot of space for innovation in that area. And we have also, of course, need to take under consideration the climatic conditions we find. And we always say, for example, here in this part of the world, we have a sunshine region with a lot of sun. Yeah, but we also hot and humid, and so solars may not be as efficient as in cooler countries. So we have to take that into the equation. The incentives or drivers behind that are the annual increase in demand. We have maybe electric vehicles approaching and bringing completely new challenges to how we manage our network. We have huge demand response potential, not only for industrial estates, but also probably for larger consumers in the private sector. And future potential of the electrical use in buildings. So, as you said, buildings can go, we saw before, 100% renewable, and there is lots of new technologies in the channel. The microgrid solutions, as I mentioned, will create independent communities. Here, a quick one, we have the different market scenarios. I believe we should move to unbundled markets, because unbundled markets will be much more, or have much more potential to support the developments in the intelligent networks and smartening our cities, and combine technologies like electricity, transportation, healthcare, public services, and etc. together. Because nothing of that in the future can go by themselves. So, compared, and we have one challenge, and some people they were thinking, compared with customers in the telecommunication industry or travel industry, where people have choices. In the electricity industry, you don't. You sign up and you have to pay. You just have to believe it. And I have a story, a quick one. In Mexico, CFE did the research, which is the most untrusted enterprise in the country. It's the utility. And that was the outcome. Now they unbundle it and they do a lot of advertisement. So in this scenario, we need to have, again, what I said before, the triangle in between consumer, regulator, and the energy providers or utilities. So where are we heading to? As a conclusion, there will be significant changes how we produce and we consume energy. We won't produce and consume energy like we do today anymore in 10 or 20 years. Utilities will have to quickly adapt and implement new business processes and consumer engagement processes. And EVs, mini grids, renewable energies, and all that integrated, that will dramatically change the way we behave and change the way we live. And policymakers are challenged to keep up with the developments of technology because typically, the market moves ahead and the policies aren't there yet. And that's a big challenge for the policymakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jürgen. I especially like that last slide because truly it is heading that way, and a lot of work needs to be done to allow that to happen because that is the future. Thank you. And we're going to go to our next speaker. Jan van der Ven is the Asia Director of the Carbon Trust and responsible for the development of the Carbon Trust's activities in China and Asia. Prior to joining Carbon Trust, he was the Deputy General Manager of Maersk Logistics in South China, and he was also Head of Strategic Planning at Maersk. Jan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for showing up. There's a surprising low proportion of people actually dozing off just after lunch, which is very good. Positive sign our content is relevant. I will talk a little bit about low carbon cities, what we've done on that topic at the Carbon Trust. And before I do that, just very quickly introduce to you what our company does. So we are a small consulting firm focused on accelerating the move to a sustainable low carbon economy. We were set up in the UK in 2001 with funding from the UK's Department of Energy and Climate Change, and we've since advised businesses, governments, and the public sector on opportunities to reduce carbon emissions. We also measure and certify those emissions and those footprints, and we also have a pretty significant piece of work on developing and accelerating technologies, clean technologies, also for both government and industry. I will focus obviously on the public sector today and how saving carbon actually saves money, which is not a new topic, I'm sure, for you. So in the UK, which is our home base and where we had the good fortune of having a significant grant from the UK government, we've been working since 2001 with over 400 cities and municipal governments. We've covered all the very large cities with the exception of London, mysteriously, but everybody else has pretty much been on board. We've worked with them in two stages always, which is one, helping them to first save carbon at the level of the city's own operations, so the own municipal government's operations, and then expanding that to the wider city footprint. Significant amount of carbon there saved over that period, and with a very good payback. I think we're all familiar with how the payback works for the private sector, energy efficiency. No need to make that case here before this audience, but the public sector is always slightly less clear, but a good payback there in the initial years, and the projects that we've currently identified and working on have a slightly longer payback, but also larger savings are identified. We've started now exporting that know-how, and very excited to be working in Mexico, where we're designing, training, and providing implementation support to the state governments of a number of large states in Mexico, which is funded by the British Foreign Office. Which brings us to two quick examples of what we've done in the UK. Aberdeen, known to most of you, where we've worked with them establishing a baseline and a plan, and then followed with them on actual emissions reduction opportunities. As you can see, emissions going down by 20% over 4 years, not a bad result. And a lot of that actually, we saw that in one of the previous slides, actually waste tends to be a source of significant opportunity for emission savings. That was the case here as well. In Aberdeen, a large portion of those savings were simply from optimizing the waste treatment and a few other initiatives, as you can see on the slide. All in all, a very good and encouraging result. And at a much different scale, a smaller municipality called Colchester with a more impressive saving record there as well. And you can see also personal, so the key initiatives that were responsible for those savings. My own favorite is the replacement of the cremators, obviously, because when you burn, there is heat and also energy consumption, and that was a significant saving source for that small municipality. Which brings us to the topic here today. So the low-carbon cities in Malaysia. We've worked with local government stakeholders at the national level, but also with the City Council of Petaling Jaya, which is a suburb of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and with funding from the UK's Foreign Office. We've worked there also with a local partner, helping us to reach out to local stakeholders, define a methodology for a city-level carbon reduction plan, and then as a follow-up project to that, we've then also structured that approach and the resources to progress this to a citywide level, and that project has just concluded last year. That's been a very comprehensive exercise, allowing the city to effectively reduce their emissions by 25%, and doing that in a very short time span. As you can see, within 5 years, that is a significant reduction. We've also ensured that we've had the senior buy-in at the municipal government level, and the training and the financial business case to be bought into across all decision-making levels in that city. We followed the same process basically as we've done in the UK, where we identify the saving opportunities, identify the strategy that needs to follow, and then implement that strategy as a last step in that process. And if we look at the baseline for Petaling Jaya for that particular city, we can see that a significant portion of those emissions are from transportation, as you can see here, and in identifying the opportunities, that has also been a significant focus area, because we can see that petrol and diesel obviously are the key energy sources for transportation, and there's ways that we can change this around. And so what we actually did is, in terms of the recommendations, provided a number of those residential emissions, where we made a few recommendations. As it was pointed out earlier, actually that is not often the most significant part, but it is one that is fairly easily addressed. Industrial and commercial emissions have also had some opportunities identified, including LED. There was a presentation on that yesterday on the technology as itself, how mature that already is, and we're actually quite convinced that that is indeed the case. A number of other areas, but I mentioned before transportation. There's actually a significant number of initiatives that we've rolled out for transportation. As you can see, hybrid vehicles, also a number of initiatives around private vehicle emissions, electric vehicles for the municipality and the city government's own vehicle fleet, and also for that public transportation fleet that it operates. And then, last but not least, which I thought I would never see, is an initiative around cycling and pedestrian commuting to and from the center of that suburb, because as in Manila, Kuala Lumpur is a pretty hot place to be outside for too long. But the city has actually quite recently invested in their first dedicated cycle lane, and that is, I've seen myself, is actually getting some serious traction locally. So we believe that there's a real opportunity there for the city to achieve those targets, and that some of the prejudices perhaps that sometimes exists around what is possible in a particular set of climate conditions is not always a real barrier, and as we've seen here, hopefully that will be the case for Petaling Jaya as well. We've projected those carbon savings and financial benefits based on the experience that we've developed in the UK, and also, of course, discounted those cash flows and also savings, carbon savings only related to the actual accepted lifetime benefit of those measures. So, for example, if you look at behavior change, that only lasts for 18 months. If you look at installing new equipment and new boilers, that will last the lifetime of the boiler. So, with that, I thank you for your attention, and please reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jan. That was very interesting on what we're doing and you're doing in Petaling Jaya, and the use of CO2 to target, the CO2 emissions to target which sectors to go after first. Okay, and so the last speaker we have is Ashish, who is head of the Strategic Planning and Innovations Group at Reliance Industries in Mumbai. He's also the lead designer of the Design Lab, which is a strategic think tank promoted by the Nataraja Foundation. He's also a convener of Reliance's International Advisory Board, which includes economists, global CEOs, and senior diplomats as members. Over the last 24 years, he has worked on power plants, ports, LNG terminals, oil refineries, and pipelines. He's also been a trader on crude oil. So several of the Design Lab projects based on innovative financing are currently under active consideration by the Indian government, which includes a secondary school maker project, a project in Delhi, a defense economic zone project, and something on India's crude oil strategic reserves. So Ashish, please come and share your work at the Design Lab. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I'd like to thank ADB and ACF for inviting me for this function, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. What I'm going to talk about is essentially, clean energy projects are normally, take a lot of money to finance them on the scale that they're required, and there's not enough money to do the kind of things we want to do. So what I've done here is essentially create a hybrid project of mixing it with India's smart city program, and then releasing a large amount of finance over the next 10-15 years, which was hitherto not thought possible. So here, what I'm going to be talking about is essentially moving large amounts of capital out of its urban equity withdrawal. It's based on a paper written by the World Bank, but I've gone much further than the World Bank paper of 1997 to create this thing. Later on, after the presentation, there are these handouts I have which people can take, which essentially show over the next 10-15 years, India can raise potentially $1.24 trillion for smart city development, and possibly $90 billion out of that for clean energy. So I'll go to the next slide. Yeah. The views expressed in this presentation are my own views, and some of the projects that I'm going to be talking about have been developed by me in 2009, and I've been pursuing it with the government on a private basis through my Nataraja Foundation. So that's one thing. It's not the ideas of any organization. See, India faces challenges on a scale, given its ambition. We want to add 175 gigawatt over the next, under COP21, and 100 gigawatt out of this is solar, 75 gigawatt is wind and other forms of energy. we've got to finance all this. We have major challenges because we've got a banking system that's in trouble. We've got almost $50 billion in stressed loans with the banking system, and the smart city program that is announced by the government, it's got a budget of just $1.2 billion a year, where over the next 10 years we require 1.2 trillion. And that's the kind of in this kind of scenario where you want to grow from a grow the $2.1 trillion economy to a $4.5 trillion economy, and in the process create 75 million jobs over the next 10 years. You need very major advances in financing to be able to do that, and that's something that I'm going to be talking about. See, I've been working on urban equity withdrawal for a couple of years, and this is the first project. It's an L&D project that was announced in the Times of India in October 2015. What has happened is, what L&D has said, this is the Bandra East project. The land was owned by the government of Maharashtra, 93 acres of land, and L&T told the government that we will spend 30,000 crores, that's roughly $4.5 billion on developing this, 4.46 billion developing this. We'll sell it for 18.57 billion. The consultant fees are 0.74, variable sales, that's the balancing amount. But essentially the last line, $10.4 billion would be the payout in cash to the government of Maharashtra. If you look at this number, it is, the Channel Tunnel project was $14.5 billion. And this particular thing, it is going to be releasing $10.4 billion. And these are going to be, India is going to, in the next few years, in my view, embark on a series of projects of, size which are pretty large. And the L&T will probably get this project because an earlier consortium in the last government, just 3 years ago, had submitted for the same parcel of land. They had submitted a bid, and they were going to give the government only 0.19 billion in cash. In comparison, L&T is going to give around 10.4. That's what they've said in the newspaper report. So what does this project mean? It means that you can see, if 93 acre property can generate 10.4 billion, what is the potential of this kind of project for the rest of India? And we'll see the new normal in project sizes going up in India. Now the subject of this particular thing, I'm only going to take up the first line. That is, I've been conservative with my numbers because after I wrote those papers that I wrote in September, this L&T thing was announced in October, and I've been proved wrong because the numbers that this particular report that came in the newspaper was talking about much larger numbers that I had estimated. The second way of raising this money is by changing the taxation on land conversion in India. When you convert on the periphery of cities, you convert agricultural land to city, urban development land. You need to move if you move just the taxation from the agricultural valuation to the urban valuation, you can raise $300 billion. Similarly, if you rezone our cities to create financial centers, one-time 100-year rezoning by employing consultants from around the world, you can raise probably $900 billion. So that's, and McKinsey called me thrice to talk about this because they said we didn't know how this was going to be done, but this is probably may work, right? Now this is the project. We are going to develop the eastern waterfront of Bombay. This is how it looks today. Okay, it's a dilapidated port, and it's going to it's in this condition. It's 18 kilometers of waterfront. These are the 12 different projects. These 3 of them I've thought about in 2011, but the initial plan that I wrote was in 2009, and they're going to be a Disneyland in Bombay, university hub project, a financial center. Then a metro, super tall building, a flamingo reserve, and affordable mass housing and all that. This is how it's going to look in 2022. This is how it's going to look in 2027. And while it does this, it will also release a huge amount of capital for building these clean energy things. Tom Peters has said, design is about demonstrating how beautiful something can be, and good design has profound capacity. So this is the plan, urban equity withdrawal for a low carbon future. You would take out roughly 1,20,000 crores because that 93 acre property was generating this, it was 10.4 billion. This is 17.3 because I've kept a low number and I've been conservative because a lot of marine work is required here in this area to do it up. A lot of marine work required, therefore I've been conservative. And we'll put in money into a 2,000 megawatt offshore wind turbine facility. Then there will be 60,000 check dams. You know, this area that I've shown in those red circles and the black thing on the right, their water tables have fallen from 125 feet to 1,200 feet today. The entire area is drought affected. So we will be building 60,000 small dams so that the water percolates and the water tables rise. So essentially your pumping cost is going to come down tremendously because huge amount of pumping cost there. And then strategic investments in urban education, healthcare, and rural infra, which is about 78,000 crores. So this will be $4.45 billion is strategic equity that will be generated for investment in clean energy. And this government will use this money to set up PPP ventures for offshore. I'm not very clear on the location of the site, but I'm just indicatively indicating where the wind turbines will come up. Now, just doing a 2,000 megawatt offshore wind turbine project will, it will in itself decrease the project cost by about 30% because everything will be done within the project. So there will be a huge reduction in project cost, and we'll probably be a benchmark, setting a new benchmark in offshore wind costs. And this is the kind of support it requires from Government of India. I have already written to Minister of Finance and people in the Finance Ministry, and I got a response from the RBI Governor's Office, which said send this to the Ministry of Finance and Urban Development. I've been writing to Raghuram Rajan for a long time, and this was the only thing his office responded to. That means the guy has been reading it. Okay, and then that means it's got some credibility because of what L&T has done, and it's actually proved the project's actually being talked about. Now, I'm saying that when you release this kind of money, it requires a high court monitored process to implement it, because otherwise there will be leakage of funds and stealing. So you've got to have a high court monitored process, and the paper that I've written, I spent 6 months thinking about how to prevent leakages and stealing. So I've done a pretty good job about how to prevent leakage. And then implementation of this plan itself could double Indian GDP by 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. That was excellent. I think that's interesting. I think if I were to perhaps bring together everything out of the four presentations, I would say that we started right with talking about the process of developing a climate action plan. The example from San Diego and how to go about doing it, the consultative process. It took 3 years and 5 years and 3 mayors. And I think that was a very good one, and how it might be relevant to our Asian cities, that the fact that we need to develop a climate action plan, and in doing so, we get to identify where the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. I think from that, we also need to look at, integral part of it is the grid, both the ICT grid and the power grid, because as we say in this conference several times, electricity powers growth, powers development. And I think Jürgen's presentation really gave us outlined all the things that needed to be done, and the things that the grids need to be sensitive about as we move forward, as there's more demand for electric vehicles, as we move with the variability of renewables coming onto the grid, and the need for smart grids and the policies and regulations that are needed to get those in place. And I think that's very important, because that becomes sort of the backbone of the system. I think the work that Carbon Trust does, and the use of CO2 emissions, and figuring out where the emissions are coming from, and therefore targeting those areas with the highest emissions first for reductions, is a good way to move forward. And finally, I think Ashish gave us an innovative way to look at financing some of the innovations that need to be done in the smart cities. Because I think when you talk to cities, that's one of their biggest problems, is how do they finance the good ideas that they have. Unfortunately, unfortunately, all these presentations could have taken an hour each, and they would have been very, very interesting. But what we really wanted to do at this forum is to get a lot of conversation going. There's often as much expertise on the floor as there is here on the table. So I've restricted them to 10 minutes each, and and they've kept to that. Thank you very much. And so we really want to have a discussion and have some questions coming from the floor, or even comments on some interesting work that may be related to this that you're doing. So I'm going to do that. We're going to go on till 3:30. We have half an hour to do this. So I open this to the floor. Please identify yourself, your name, your organization you're with, and go ahead with the question. Maybe we'll take 2 or 3 questions before we answer. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ashok. I work with the World Resources Institute from India. I have one specific question about smart cities to the panel and everyone in the room. So what are the cities doing themselves? Usually, typically when we talk about smart cities, we are seeing that there is transportation that is being targeted. But at the city level, there is a lot of pumping that happens, especially water pumping. And I'm particularly interested in knowing if are there any cities which have explored using water pumping as a demand response measure to integrate renewables? For example, solar power. You have a generation curve. Can you pump water at the same time when it generates? There won't be any integration problems with the variation of the renewable energy. To put this in context, the city where I come from, Bangalore, Bangalore gets about more than 70-80% of its water from a distance of 100 kilometers pumped to over an elevation of 1 kilometer. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ?
Yeah, I represent a group of activists that are practitioners.
Can you speak to the mic?
I represent a group that are now practitioners and were previously development consultants. And I particularly want to ask a question about what I'm going to call the rock and the hard place that a lot of Asian cities face, okay? This gentleman is from Bangalore. The urban population in Bangalore is about 30+% in slums and informal cities, in informal communities that don't have electricity, okay? And they tend to be in the areas, well, not as relevant for Bangalore, but in other cities, okay? In the most vulnerable land aspects of the city, okay? The lowest level land. So when you think about the issues and the problems of resilience, when I say the cities are in a rock and a hard place, they're under pressure, and rightly so, to solve what other things have been talking about, which is access. To get people in those communities to have access not only to electricity and ICT infrastructure, not to mention water, sanitation, and others, okay? And we're trying to talk about being smart, okay? Those cities are in a rock and a hard place. Two of the presenters talked about either implicitly in terms of the San Diego case or explicitly in terms of the other case where you talked about consumers, utilities, and policymakers. I would be willing to bet, okay, in none of the cases that have been looked at, the consumers who are yet to be consumers are represented in that stakeholder, okay? And probably there's none of those folks in San Diego, okay? But I'm betting that if you go up to LA, there are a lot of communities, okay, for which where the connectivity is not that great, okay? And they're also in the areas that are low-lying and more risky, but they do have electricity. I just would like all of you to comment about how you think, okay, this between what I'm going to calling the rock and the hard place that's faced by so many Asian cities that are so vulnerable, okay, to climate change, okay, because of their physical locations and what have you, and at the same time having to address, okay, the needs of the communities that they're in, okay, and how they're smart or non-smart are going to be able to tackle these problems. Thanks.
Thank you, Russ.
If you don't mind, I would like to answer to your point, because I really like what you say. And to give you an answer, we don't have to travel very far to any of your rocky places. We just can stay here in Manila, because you have a lot of them here as well. And here in Manila is a solution where in slums, consumer engagement did lead to better life. There's a very, very good example for that it works in the world. What happened is typically in the low income in the slums here, the people steal the power. Simply when they were very creative how they pulled the wires in their houses, and they never paid for it. then the utility came and said, hey, we'll need to somewhere meter it. So they metered it and they tried to disconnect them, but it never worked because the people tampered with the meters and they put the meters up on the poles, you know, and so the people cannot tamper with the meter anymore. And then they figured out, well, this is now a hell of a job to read the meter because we need a bucket truck to get up there to read the meter. And then you never get a parking spot where the pole is because the place is crowded and you never can read. So it was a nightmare, you know, and that carried on for time. So then actually not the engineers, not the guys who run the network approached these people, but the initiative was done by the marketing guys, by the consumer engagement people, who said, listen guys, we give you, we want to create an environment for you that you can better manage your finances. You need to pay for your electricity, but we help you, we give you a tool at hand how you can do that. And there was a couple of years campaigns, and then they introduced a prepaid metering system with virtual wallets and how they can manage their finances with very smart ways that people get informed about their energy behavior and how they can improve and so on. An extremely successful project here in Manila, which now got even traction by the wealthy part, the post-business consumers say, this is so good, we want to have that as well. And there are examples around the world where these kind of areas are addressed. And in the second part of an answer to what you were asking, of course, is one of the major requirement, and then policymakers are very much part of it, is to give people access to begin with to sanitation, to water, clean water, not only water, clean water, and to electricity, so to improve the quality of life. But there is not only the utility are, the policymakers, governments, they are challenged on that as well.
Please go ahead. Just press this button.
Oh, okay. Sorry, so just to, even though San Diego doesn't have this extreme poverty and slums that we have in our Asian cities, we do have a big gap between wealthy and poor. And I can tell you that it is the poorer people who use public transportation, for example. And the lady that I showed you in that photograph that was on the left was part of the NGO called Environmental Health Coalition, and she single-handedly brought a lot of the low-income people to these stakeholder meetings. They would appear in, hundreds of people to give their support to this climate action plan because they saw it a way as getting co-benefits, which means reduced air pollution in their areas because they tend to live in the areas where the pollution is worse, like near the port. And also because they were hoping to be able to get some funding to improve their infrastructure in their areas, like get more buses for them to be able to use it and cleaner buses. And so because of this great participation that was really motivated and by the climate action planning and by this one woman who was running the environmental NGO, they have been able to get a lot of attention, and environmental justice issues have come up a lot. And cap and trade money in California is going a lot to low-income communities. So I think in the beginning I thought there's no way the low-income groups are going to get anything out of this, but by being sort of made to participate, everybody has become more aware of their situation, and I think they're getting something out of it.
I think, It's a good question when, before the chairman says anything, speakers start to talk. Yeah, so good job, Russ. I think that it also highlights the fact that, you know, although it's very different between the issues in the richer countries and the poor countries, I think this issue of access, this issue of the bottom of the pyramid is the same everywhere. And they need a voice to speak on this. So, Dan, I think you had a question there also next. And
I think this guy deserves an answer. The first question.
okay, do you have a question? Do you have?
Yeah, just give you a very quick example. Also, we don't need to travel that far. Thailand is now implementing massively solar pumping for the rice paddy fields. And the Metropolitan Water Authority in Bangkok has reviewed their energy consumption on pumping and is apparently now about to implement a solution coming from the electricity industry regarding forecasting and optimization, data analytics, to improve the management of the wells and the pumping to reduce dramatically, not only reduce the amount or reduce the electricity bill, but also to reduce water losses. So there are examples in the area where this apparently happens.
And again, to your question, so San Diego gets about 80 to 90% of its water, depending on the rainfall in that year, from outside. And we're very, very dry. We have about 10 inches of rain a year, except in the mountain areas. So there is an incentive to conserve as much water as we can. And we do have 2 pumped hydro situations, and there are some people thinking about, and they pump it at the moment at night when the rates are cheaper, but it's natural gas then. So there are people thinking about using the solar that we're having to pump the water during the day. Yeah.
Anything from the other end of the table? Nope. Okay, good. Dan.
Thanks. Since you mentioned rain, no one talked about rainwater harvesting, so I was just wondering if anyone would comment on the prospects for that. San Diego, maybe there's not much to try to work with there, but seasonally, maybe there is. And no one talks specifically about green buildings, but I'm kind of curious. I mean, my own opinion, not necessarily well informed, is that at least for the multilateral development banks, I think there are some pretty good opportunities to get into green building finance where I think there were prospects for some significant leveraging. Nomina, you made some notes about the building efficiency, but I think it's broader than just the energy efficiency, so I was just wondering if anyone could comment on that. And Ashish, I was also hoping that you could explain maybe just a little more detail on this urban equity withdrawal, because what I understood was that it's that there's this big swath of property that's ready to be redeveloped. So it's just basically, it's kind of like right now it looks like a stranded asset, but with the right approach on redevelopment, you're going to get a huge infusion of private sector capital that frees up some of the city's money, or I didn't quite understand the mechanics on that. Thanks.
Okay, before we go, any other questions for the time being? Okay, go ahead. Who wants to take on his questions?
I can try the energy efficiency one, just because, as you saw at the local level, there's not much that the local government can do to further increase the energy efficiency reduction. So the state is mandating certain things, and there are private-public partnerships that are financing this. And I have to say that energy efficiency is a very interesting analytical issue, because as you say insulate your buildings, what exactly are the emissions that you're avoiding? What is the electricity that you're avoiding? And we've had to deal with this a lot recently. Are you avoiding the marginal electricity at that moment, or are you avoiding the average grid electricity energy intensity? And so depending on what value you use, you will get very different amounts for how much electricity you're saving and how much greenhouse gases that you're avoiding. So this is a really big issue. The other thing is that energy efficiency targets new buildings. The new buildings have it easier to do it, but retrofitting existing buildings is very difficult and it's very expensive. And we found that the uptake rate, so when you sell your house, for example, or you do a major retrofit, you have to do an energy audit. That is what the Climate Action Plan requires. And the reason why we have so few emissions reductions from that is we've found there's only about a 12% uptake in actual retrofits that people will do. So even though you have a mandate to do an energy audit, you don't get people, you get about 12% people actually doing something about it, which is why we have low emissions reductions from those measures, just to add to your... that applies mostly to residential. Sorry? Rainwater harvesting, oh yeah. So there are 30 policies that have been implemented in this climate action plan, and many of them are in the form of ordinances. Rainwater harvesting is there as a support measure. The ordinance is to make people buy outdoor irrigation systems that react to the weather. Okay, and we can get more reductions from that. But as a support measure, we do have rainwater harvesting. The city has incentives, so you can get like $500 for a barrel or something. There are some incentives, yeah.
Just in the city of Boulder, Colorado, which is supposed to be one of the greenest, smartest cities in the United States with smart grid rollout and everything, rainwater harvesting is illegal.
Illegal?
Illegal because in the regional water management program, they're accounting for all of the rainwater to be going in to recharge the aquifers. So it technically, well, yeah, the consumers have no right to harvest it. Yeah, which.
By the way, Dan, to your previous question, I think what we all miss in, there's technical solutions, yes, but we are all consumers, and a huge amount of energy efficiency is possible by change consumer behavior. So there's a lot of going also with education, with marketing, changing consumer behavior, and there is various mechanisms to do that. And beyond that, on energy efficiency on commercial buildings, that's a whole different dimension, what we can achieve there. And I think there's numerous programs in different countries around the world. And also, you cannot compare them on a global level. You have to take that down to regional levels to see what applies and what applies best.
Ashish, you want to?
Yeah, I want to answer Dan's question on urban equity withdrawal. See, this is an economy that's growing, and India is, the kind of wealth that is trapped with people. It is amazing, the amount of gold we buy, for instance. We are the largest buyers of gold in the world. Okay, and people in Bombay are parking their aircraft in Delhi. There's no space in the city. Okay, so this is reality, and it's just the amount of demand that there is. I mean, when you go and talk about land prices, it's a big issue, and people have a lot of money to invest in land. So I'm not seeing, as the economy literally doubles in size over the next 8 to 10 years, I'm not seeing any problem in being able to sell it. People are paying 400 crores for a quarter acre in Bombay in places. So when it's done, and it depends on how you structure a project. Essentially, the whole game is in the structuring and how you structure a project. There's no problem with raising financing for these kind of things. This is around, this is a $40 to $60 billion development talking about. I'm not seeing any problem raising money.
Could you talk a bit about the mechanics of urban equity withdrawal? So, like Dan said, are you assuming that there's actually equity in this land that is dilapidated now?
Yes.
But because it's dilapidated,
yes,
the value is very low.
Yes.
But if you're able to develop it,
Yeah.
you're building equity on that. And therefore, it's now worth more. And what you're trying to do is withdraw that delta between where it is now, where it can be later, and use that to finance the development. Is that how it works?
No, no. See, the very fact that there is land there, where you try to put that land on the market, and you will see people are least bothered about what its current state is. They'll just pay the kind of money there is. And what I'm in this scheme, the papers that I've written, is essentially raising the FSIs in a very quantized manner, in certain packets of it, to raise it from current levels of 1.5 to between 6 and 9 in certain areas, which will get in the financial, the financial district, for instance. The other places for housing. So it's going to be a planned development. So some areas will be given for low-cost housing also. It's not, there's going to be a park like Central Park, New York, where the difference in this particular thing is it's going to be an 18-kilometer long park by 400 meters.
So my question is, now,
Yeah.
most municipal governments in the developing world
Yes.
have lack of funding.
Yes.
Right? They don't have the money to do what they want to do.
Yes.
They're not like San Diego.
Yeah.
So, but they want to do what you want. You're proposing it. They
Yeah.
want to do it, but they can't finance it.
See, this land is not owned by the municipality. This land is owned by the Port Trust of Bombay, of India. Okay, a Mumbai Port Trust essentially. So the Port Trust it's got land all over the place. When you structure a project, it's the way you structure it. You can sell it to institutional investors abroad. You can do a lot of things with it. So once you get these people involved and they've seen land prices in Bombay, and you offer half an acre in Nariman Point, and you'll see what happens and what kind of response you get. They know where the money is, and there'll be no dearth of investors for this. Absolutely. Yes. 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 But yeah, sure, it's here. The 50 copies here, so anybody can pick it up if they want to. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, absolutely, I'll do that.
Please, sir.
Thank you, Chair. This is to Dr. Liman.
Please identify yourself.
Salil, applied researcher. This issue of air quality is directly correlated with leaves burning in the forest fires in the area of San Bernardino, San Diego, and that whole hinterland. So, and also we are aware that Southern California is a basket of fruits, so you have a lot of agricultural waste. So is there any scheme you are already doing to curb the air issues? Because you normally have to spray water from the helicopters, which consumes a lot of energy and water in curbing these forest fires. And it can be sudden, really, and it has tremendous health issues. People end up spending more. So is there a possibility that, the health scheme savings could be pumping little money for this sort of scheme so that you have a waste to energy through bioanaerobics? So you don't end up in having this forest fires.
So the issue of forest fires, we've been doing these, we've been tracking greenhouse gas emissions since 2008 for the whole region. And in 2003 and in 2007, we had enormous wildfires. So if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions profile in those years, you get these enormous spikes. But those trees grow back again, and so we have absorption as well, especially in the initial years when the trees go back. There is no thinking about how to kind of capitalize on the public health benefits of not having fires. There is a strong move to prevent fires by educational means and trying to reduce the sprawl to the urban forest interface. And I think that is part of land use planning. And so to that extent, it is part of the general plans of each city. And so there's a huge educational effort to help people understand why we need to not expand to those areas, for example. That's all there is.
One of the things, if anybody here is ever asked to be a session chair, there are 3 people in the ASEF that usually come every year that you should always get to your session. Russ is always one of them because he always asks very good questions. Dan is another one because he likes to talk. And another person that you should always try to get to your session is Peter DuPont because he also likes to ask a lot of questions. So Dan, please ask your next question.
Sir, just for the record, this year I'm not doing a presentation. I'm the track 4 chair, so I get some kind of executive authority to intervene whenever I want to. And when it comes to keeping my opinions to myself, I'm at least as good as Donald Trump.
You struggle with that, I know.
Yeah, just like Donald Trump. Salil, his comment jogged my memory, which is, what kind of opportunities do any of you see to do retrofit of municipal sewage treatment plants, adding an anaerobic digester and using that recovered methane to actually power the plants? My understanding in India is that in most of the cities, the municipal sewage treatment plants aren't even operating because they can't afford to pay the power or the power is not available. And 5 years back, World Bank was talking big about doing this Ganges cleanup program where the key thing was going to be to retrofit those treatment plants, and they were talking about net zero energy. They'd be able to run independently of the grid. So could any of you offer your thoughts about that? I think this is another thing where ADB isn't doing this, but should be doing this. And World Bank's project, they had put it in for Clean Technology Fund co-financing, and then it got dropped out a couple years ago.
Can I answer that? See, you're absolutely right. You go and see some of the municipal plants run by the municipal corporation in Mumbai. They're in very bad condition. In fact, they've just shut down many of these facilities and they're discharging the waste directly into the ocean. For instance, fecal coliform levels offshore Mumbai is almost 4,000 times more than what it should be. Okay, in some places you'll be surprised to know that the level of mercury in the water, okay, is 45 times minimata. So there's very serious problems, and they're not, there's certain pockets in that. What I have done in my project is to, we know where the mercury is, we know where these things are, to sequester the sediment in islands. So in part of this project, which you have not seen here, there are 24 projects within the Mumbai mega project which I have written, and some of those these island projects will sequester those sediments in this one. So you need as far as the question is concerned about retrofitting the plants, I don't know whether they are in fit condition to get retrofit. Probably building a completely new ETP makes sense. So and there's bureaucracy involved. You go and try to do something, it's difficult. But if you try something totally new, probably more recall for that, and probably more attention will be given to something like that.
I can't resist following Dan and making comments about his comments, then reacting to the comments of the panel. One of the differences between San Diego and a great number of cities in the Asian world, not to mention a few ones that were just cited too in terms of why the municipal treatment plants are. Compare municipal governance in the state of California with municipal governance in any state in India. Even or for that matter, lots of other places in the world, and compare municipal governance, okay? As they used to say in Italy, okay, the best run city, okay, in Italy is governed by the communists. It's Bologna, okay? Municipal governance, okay, is a critical issue, okay, in lots of places in the world, but particularly in a lot of the municipalities in Asia, okay? And I would say that that's a function also of the politics and other stuff, okay? How do we transfer, if you would, the relative betterness, okay, of municipal governance in the state of California, okay, to municipal governance, okay, in other places in the world? And if you can come up with a good solution about that, that's politically feasible, given the oxes that will get gored, okay, if those improvements are made, I would love to hear the miracles coming from the panel. I'm sorry for the cynicism.
Yeah, can I just comment on that? See, this, as far as India is concerned, municipal self-governance is a major issue. In fact, we've got in the state of Maharashtra and in Delhi, we've got this parastation called the Development Corporation, Mumbai Municipal Regional Development Corporation. It is actually an illegal organization. The entire organization is illegal because it goes against the 74th Amendment of the Constitution, which was the state hasn't passed it in the state assembly. So once that 74th Amendment is passed, these organizations will cease to exist. And therefore, we've suffered greatly because of the 74th Amendment not being passed, because we have not been able to produce leaders at the third level of government. So you're very right. And India doesn't react until it's pushed.
Ashish,
When Mohanty-
when Mohanty was in charge in Hyderabad,
Yes.
every Saturday he used to have a session with every one of the department heads in an open conference, okay?
Yeah.
An open public, okay? And anybody could come up and ask a question of the department head about whether a problem was being solved in the problem in his area, okay? And Mohanty would turn to him and say, okay, are you going to address that? And that same person had to be there the next week, and the next week, and the next week. Now, we used to call that in New England, we used to call that public shaming, okay? In the sense that you haven't done your job and something has to be done. But that takes a level of political leadership,
Yes.
okay, willing to do that. Political will is perhaps the scarcest commodity that we have, okay, globally, okay? And we don't have very many Mohanties, okay, who did that for their communities and other things, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I promise, I'm going to try the best to not make any more comments.
Well, we
Thank
only
you.
got 1
Thank you.
minute and
All right.
13 seconds, Rusty.
Speaking of which, if I may, just because on political will, I think there was a point made by our female panelist in the beginning of the presentation, which I think nobody picked up on, but she indicated that a lot of the policies of San Diego in terms of sustainability are actually driven by, if not the fear, the concern for the risk of litigation, and that's an interesting development, because I think you will have seen in the media recently, actually just the last 12 months has seen quite a couple of both national and state level climate change cases brought by citizens and groups of lawyers who are still an informal aggregation of enthusiasts and idealists and some really competent people. But I wonder, and there's a question to our panelists from San Diego, what do you see any a trend that is taking shape, and if so in the U.S., any other jurisdictions where you see the threat of litigation or the future risk of litigation actually becoming a part of policy making on climate change and sustainability?
Yeah, so there's another paper that I'm working on about exactly that issue. And when we look sort of globally across the world, the United States is the single most litigious nation on earth. So it doesn't matter what it is, but in the climate change arena, there is a website from Columbia University that has looked at that, and it's just case after case after case. So the environmental NGOs, people like the Sierra Club, are really responsible for example, I think they've prevented 100 coal power plants from being built. Okay, so there are professional environmental NGOs. They have good attorneys that will fight these things. They have funding. So I don't see this happening in other places. through citizen action to that extent, unless these NGOs take it up in other cases, other countries.
So it's interesting because actually I was on that site from Columbia Law just last evening, and I think the number is 826 climate cases in the U.S. only.
That's it.
But not only targeting local government, but also corporations. So it's an aggregation of those cases. But there's also an annex of international cases, and they're growing. And I'm sure some of you are aware of the Dutch case, where actually, that's the first time a national government has been ordered by the court to step up and meet its obligations to reduce its emissions. So yeah, I think that's probably something we're not really seeing on the map or the radar very clearly yet, but I think that's coming. And it's interesting to see how local governments respond to that.
Just to add to that, I think in the States and in California, it's very specific cases about how you calculate the emissions. I mean, the judges and the council that are helping these judges have a hard time because the Sierra Club is going into the details of how this thing is done. And it's not like the general case in Holland where they're saying, okay, the country really has to reach these targets. In San Diego and in other cities in California, cities are being ordered to go back and redo the calculations and redo their policies and make it enforceable. So it's a very strong push from them, much greater than in other places that I've seen.
Okay.
Just flash, maybe a last comment on that. I was part of the design process of the Amsterdam Smart City project. So when we developed all the solutions there, one key aspect was, and because that became a success story, is we made the consumer want it. And the consumer then made the politicians make it. Because there's somebody, they stand up, hey, this is good, we want this now, and we are the people who vote for you. So that makes politicians move. When the consumer, when the public really would love to have that. And that was one of the key issues for the successful implementation of a very, very complex smart city infrastructure in Amsterdam.
So after the session, I've been told I have to summarize the session. Somebody's going to interview me. I have no idea how to. It's been a wandering discussion, a very interesting one. When I was reading everybody's presentations before, except yours, before this, and I had established a few questions I was going to ask, some questions just go a different way, and I think it's fine too. But I think the point is there's a lot that needs to be taken into consideration when we're talking about smart cities. You started talking about this whole process, but that process is really quite a messy process. And we're talking about political will, we're talking about financing, we're talking about the mechanics of measuring greenhouse gas emissions and how to do that. So there's a lot to be done. I'm just going to leave it at that and thank my panelists for participating and for the discussion we had. Thank you all for participating and asking the good questions. I think next time I will tell the organizers that just to help out Russ, we can have a mic much closer to him so that he doesn't have to get up and walk in the next session. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you through the rest of the day and maybe at the cocktails tonight.
Thank you so much.